Welcome to the Grow Strong Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Bell, and I interview business leaders who are committed to their own growth and the development of everyone on their team. If you enjoy my podcast, be sure to subscribe and rate it on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for joining me on another episode of the Grow Strong Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Bell, and I enjoy so much interviewing guests who are focused on their own growth and development and also interested in helping others realize their full potential. And my guest today has dedicated many years to both of these, and I'm very excited about the conversation we're going to be having. I'd like to welcome Frank Agin. Frank, welcome to my show.
Thanks for having me. This is great. I really appreciate it.
Well, I am also very grateful to Sejal Thacker. I want to give a shout out to her because she is a super connector and she's the one who connected us. And I'm so grateful to now have you as part of my network. And this is the focus of our interview today, networking. So all of you that are interested in building stronger business relationships, you are going to love this episode. Let me tell you a little bit about Frank before we get started with our conversation. Frank is president of AmSpirit Business Connections, and that's a company that empowers entrepreneurs, sales representatives, and professionals to become successful through networking. He also hosts the Networking RX podcast, which has insights and interviews related to better business relationships. Frank is also the author of several books, including this one that I'm holding up for those of you watching the video, Foundational Networking, which I highly recommend if you're interested in learning from a true thought leader about the importance of building professional relationships. Frank, you really are a master at networking and yourself and teaching others to do it well. I would love for you to share a little bit about how you came to focus on networking as one of the key areas of business building strategies.
Yeah, that's a great question. Nobody goes off to their guidance counselor and says, hey, I want to do this. When I was in college, I adopted this mindset of work hard, get good grades, accumulate degrees, and that's the ticket. That's what you needed to do to be successful. And the college I went to, a little small liberal arts college, Beloit College, they brought a lot of corporate people on, and that was really the story. And so I doubled down on that, did really well, went off to law school, got a law degree, got an MBA, and then got a job in public accounting. And I'm like, wow, look at my resume. This is great. Now I've got a CPA. This is great. But I decided I didn't want to work in the big firm atmosphere. I kind of wanted to be more entrepreneurial. And so I left and went into the private practice of law as kind of my next step. And a funny thing happened to me when in the private practice of law, and that was nothing happened. I had this mindset. Look at all these degrees, look at everything, all this experience. I'm working out of a room in our house, so my costs are low, my fees are low. People should just be beating down the door to do business with me, and nothing was happening. And I soon realized that I don't want to say people don't care about those things, because they do, but they care about them a whole lot less than you think. And it really came down to how people felt about me. Could I get the job done? Could I find the people who needed the work done? And I had no clue as to what this networking thing was. And so I had lunch one day with a friend of mine she took a different path out of law school. She had started her own firm. And I just asked her, I said, what do I need to do to be successful? What do I need to do to have what you have? And she said, you need to get into a tips club or a leads group. And I really had no idea what she was talking about. For our listeners, there's organizations out there like LaTip or BNI. Well, they weren't in Columbus, Ohio, where I'm at, but there was an organization out of Pittsburgh they were starting a brand new chapter. It was one per category. As luck would have it, they didn't have an attorney. I got the spot. It was brand new. It was 6 of us starting this thing out. And immediately it made total sense to me that I could lift up my whole world by helping other people. And I really doubled down on that. I became chapter president. I got on a national advisory board with the company. became its first franchisee, and I just really understood this networking thing. And, it's easy for us to sit here and just talk up Sajal. She is great, and she is, and feel good about it and try and help her. But if we self-promote for 30 seconds, you just want to take a nap. And that's the beautiful thing about networking in these groups, is that you just help other people and talk them up and know that they're doing the same for you. So at one point I had the opportunity to buy the business, and there's a whole story that goes into it. We don't have enough time, but I had an opportunity to buy it, and I jumped at it. I did. I stopped the practice of law. So that's how I really got into it. And I really did it kind of as an investment. Hey, here's something unique. Here's something very entrepreneurial. But like any business, when you get into it, you need to become a student of that business. You need to become an expert. And I just really started to read and write and share and help other people. And every day is a learning experience. Every day I will never have it all figured out. So
I agree. I love your story. And there's so much that you and I share in terms of our values and interests around not just networking, but relationship building and the value of giving first. But I would like to explore with you, what is it that most people, or I won't say most, but when people get something wrong about networking, what are the things they often misunderstood or understand in terms of how to approach it and what to do?
Well, networking gets a bad rap. Networking gets, is equated to the aluminum siding salesperson or the used car salesman. It's very glad handy and, hey, buddy, do business with me. And that was my perception of really what networking and going out and being at networking function was all about. And that's what people get wrong, is they just see it as a way to get. And I call networking a bait and switch. It's a great bait and switch, in a very positive sense. Bait and switch, you look in the paper, you want to buy that fully decked out conversion van for $25,000, and you go down there and that's not here anymore, but we have the $75,000 model. That's a bait and switch. But the reason networking is a bait and switch is that people come to networking, certainly come to organizations like AmSpirit Business Connections, thinking, hey, this is my way of getting. And when they arrive, we say, that's great. We want you to get, but you have to understand that you've got to give first. You got to find ways to help other people. And people who lean into that notion really become successful. It's very counterintuitive, but it works. But that, if you're asking why people get things wrong, is they measure too quickly about what they're getting and not realize that, hey, you've got to put things into it.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. Well, thinking about the title of your book, Foundational Networking, what do you mean by foundational?
That's a great question. I knew I wanted to write a book, and there are a lot of great books out there on networking. And a lot of the books are very, what I'll call tactical. Go to the networking events, you stand here, you do this, have this handshake, here, have a good 30-second commercial, follow up, with whatever. And you know what, those, all things being equal, that's great advice, but all things are not equal. And I started to encounter people as I was running this organization who were good at all those things and had really underperforming networks. And that was perplexing to me. And then I saw people out there who did a horrible job of really presenting themselves, may not have dressed well or anything like that, but they just had very productive networks. And the things didn't align with me. And then I started to realize that, the tactics are great, but what really matters is getting people to know you, like you, and trust you. And that's got to be the first thing. That's the foundational element. And that's really what the book was about, is get this right. Yes, having a good 30-second commercial is wonderful, but if you're a butthead, it doesn't matter, right? If if you walk into an event and you're kind of mopey, I had a bad day, people don't want to align with that, Mm-hmm. And so that's really what the genesis of the book and what the book's all about, is really try to be a good person. And the phrase I keep using in the book and continue to use is become the person you want to network with.
Yes.
And that's, and I think that's easy for people to stop and just sit and think and like, okay, you know what? I want that person who's energetic, who's giving, who's, true to their word and reliable. That's who I want in my world. Well, then be that person.
I love that emphasis in your book about becoming the person, focusing on who you want to become as opposed to what you need to do, or as you say, focus on the tactics. Because I think it's just so easy to point a finger and say, well, they aren't doing this, or why am I not getting that, instead of looking within.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the challenge throughout your book is look within. Are you doing this? Are you being this way for others? This know, like, and trust, those three words have been used a lot. They're kind of standard now, but you've given a lot of deep thought to what they really mean. And I would love for you to share the distinction with those three words. Why do all three of them matter? What do they each convey?
Well, they kind of build on each other in essence. And I use other words in the book to kind of describe them. I talk about, the know as your presence and, how you show up in the world and how you want to be known. It's not really about knowing others, but it's how you show up. And again, if you're walking into a room and you have a choice between the person who has just got their chest out and ready to, take on the world in a very positive way, and the person who's kind of downtrodden and, they're bringing their bad day with them, who do you want to hang out with? And you want to hang out with the person who's, who just has this persona that they're going to have a great day. And that's really the notion of presence. And that's what we want. What do you want to know about other people? Well, what are the positive things? What do you want to know? And those are the things that you need to become yourself. Like I really align with altruism and, not just generosity, but being predisposed to give to the world around you. And when people hear the word give, they right away think about pulling their wallet out, grabbing for some plastic or whatever it might be to give money. And it's so much broader than that. Just giving someone your time, giving people encouragement. Those things are of value. And it's really, a lot of it's really easy to do. And most of it doesn't really cost any money. Making introductions. I mean, that's just the biggest thing we have to share to our network is our network. Stop and look at your network and, okay, these two people don't know each other, just like Sajal did. These people don't know each other. I don't know where it's going, but I really like them both. And it's selfish of me just to keep them to myself. So I'm going to introduce Meredith and Frank and see what comes of it, and lots has come from it. So, that's the altruism piece. And then the last piece, the trust piece, I call integrity. And it's, integrity or trust really has two aspects to it. There is the honesty aspect. All right. Let's say I'm working with a contractor type to build an addition to my house. The honesty piece is okay, here's $20,000 to get started with materials. And I know you're going to come and do the work. But the other piece of it is kind of a competency piece. I know you're going to get the materials and come do the work, and I know you're going to do it right. And those both need to be there. And I do see some people who are very honest and they're just not very competent. But you need to have both those things. But in addition to that, it's, being reliable. People say, you tell somebody you're going to do something, you do it. People need to know that, they can rely on you to be a good person, sharing the credit when something goes well, when something goes bad, not pointing fingers at everyone else and blaming it, owning whatever the mistake was. Those are the things that really kind of, talk to integrity. And it really kind of, they do build on one another. You get to know somebody And then you kind of make that formulation of, do I like them or not? And it's entirely possible to know people and like people and not trust them. You're gonna be good people. Doesn't mean they're dishonest, but they just, for whatever reason, I have a lot of people like that I know that, you know, they're just good people. I just don't know that I want to refer them to anybody. And then the last piece is the trust piece, getting people to trust us.
Yeah, I think I like the words you associate with them too in your book, because they cover so many different areas. And thank you for going into those. What I would invite my listeners to do is think about which one of those might get in your way based on what you tend to give your attention to. And that's where, to me, Frank, your book is so valuable, because you go deep into each one of those three and help. I know for me, it was thought-provoking to reflect on some of the descriptions you gave of what that looks like in action. And do I do that? How could I up-level that particular area? I think, like you said earlier, we never arrive. We're always a work in progress. So how can I improve? Well, one of the things I also know you are just amazing at, and I love doing this too, is this whole thing of making introductions. And some folks are kind of uncomfortable doing that. They don't really know how. You and I have kind of developed it into an art form, I would say, because we do it automatically now. We've kind of ingrained our brains to just think that way. But for those that haven't, what are some tips that you would share about how do you look for the opportunity to make an introduction, and what's the best way to do it so both parties feel good about it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. One of the books, another book that I wrote, it was called The Giving Journal, and there's really not much to the book. In fact, the book is available for free. If you go to frankagin.com, you can download it for free.
Oh, I highly recommend it. I have that one too. And I loved it. It was a short book, but really valuable. So I'll reinforce whatever it is you're getting ready to say.
Well, what I was going to say, the genesis of that is that I've always heard people say, well, I'm generous, I'm altruistic. And it's like, okay, yeah, you say that. I don't really see it, but you say it. And what they'll do is they'll let their mind latch on to, well, yeah, I'm generous. Last year I gave $200 to the school or whatever it is. And they hang their hat on that. And my mind is, you know, yeah, they're generous, but generosity is kind of on a spectrum. I mean, there's, you know, someone who, you know, if you're worth billions of dollars and you're giving $200, you know, is that generous? You know, if you only have $200 to your name and you give it all, you know, quantifiably, they're the same, you know, quantitatively, they're the same. But in spirit, they're totally different. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to check myself. Before I was critical of anybody else, I wanted to check myself. And so I decided I would just kind of keep notes of when I was doing things for other people. And I just had a little journal. It wasn't anything special, you know, $3 at wherever. And I just started, you know, I'd write a date, and I wasn't keeping score. I was just, this is for my purposes, you know, such and such date, I volunteered time, this charity. Such and such date, I did this. Such and such date, I did this. I introduced these two people. But I noticed in time that journal, if you will, started calling to me. Because I would look at it, it would be open on my desk, and I'm like, it's been 3 days since I've done anything notable for anybody. And so it really kind of inspired me to just, okay, I need to find something to do. I need to stop what I'm doing, and I need to do something, because I can't go another day without doing something for somebody. And it started to become habitual. I don't do that anymore because it is habitual. When I meet people, I had a conversation yesterday with a young woman. It's like, oh, you know, just as she's talking, I'm jotting notes. Okay, she needs this. I can connect her here. I can do this. You know, there's 3 things I can do. And I told her, I said, you know, you can count on these 3 things happening. And true to my word, I did it. So you're back to your question, you know, how do people adopt that mindset? I would just start keeping track of how often you do it, and just find a way to do it. Even if you say, okay, once a week, I'm going to introduce 2 people. And we all have these wonderful I call them Rolodexes, right? We're both old enough to know what a Rolodex is. But we all have CRMs or, databases of people we know. And it's easy to kind of go through and say, you know what, these two people don't know each other. What's the harm in connecting them? They're both good people. I don't know where it might go, but I will let them figure it out. And a lot of times I'll do that. I'll just email them both at the same time and say, you know what, I don't know where this goes, but I do know it goes nowhere if I don't make this introduction. So I want you two to meet each other. And more often than not, I hear back people saying, yeah, we had a conversation and, we're both into mountain climbing and, we're going to, there's a local hill to climb and we're going to do it together. Or, I didn't realize that their spouse, worked in the same company my spouse works for, and there's some synergies here. So,
well, in fact, let me just stop you a second, Frank, because as you were talking and I was thinking about, I met Jacqueline Wales because of your networking hub.
Yeah.
And she and I have formed a great relationship, and she introduced me to Leo Batari, who I just interviewed today for my podcast.
Yeah.
And he and I look like we're going to be able to do a number of things together. So, it's like you say, you don't know where it might go when you have this opportunity to introduce somebody else, but you just sort of trust, because you trust each of them.
Yeah.
You trust that they will be able to create something interesting from it.
Yeah. The way to look at it, there's 8 billion people on the planet, and it's really one network. We are all connected somehow or another. And so really the job of networking, or the objective of networking, is to find the path to the people that we need to meet. And a lot of times people want to find that direct path. They want to, okay, where's the shortest, simplest path? And sometimes the shortest and simplest path is not the best path, just because people have gatekeepers. It might be 3 steps and somebody who can make the introduction to the person you can visibly see day in and day out. But going direct to them, they don't really have a level of trust in you.
Well, exactly. There's that whole know, like, and trust. And so when someone you trust makes the introduction, you're much more likely to accept it because you trust that person. It's huge, because in reality, what you just said, that's a more time efficient way to do it, is find out who does have that connection, who already has the relationship that might. And one of the things I also do, Frank, before I ask somebody about making an introduction, I look at, well, what could I do for them first before I ask for anything? I want to have served somebody already before I ask a favor. Is that part of your mindset as well?
Yeah, I'm uncomfortable going to somebody if I haven't done something right. And a lot of times it's not necessarily for them directly. Well, I'll give you an example. I'm trying to break some of my content into radio. And I'm just exploring it. And there's a guy I know who owns a series of Christian music radio stations here in town. And, he and I have never met, but our paths have crossed because he does a lot of charitable work. And I have a monthly call with charities, not-for-profits, where I teach them about networking. It's totally free. It's called the Charitable Roundtable. People come in and I'll just talk about a lot of the same things I talk about with businesses, and teach them the same sorts of things and connect them in the same way. And he sees me operating in that and has reached out to me and has asked me, hey, we have all this extra office furniture. Is there a charity out there that might want to come pick it up and have it free? So I've done, it's been nothing for him, but he sees me he sees me putting value into the world. And so I felt very comfortable reaching out to him and just saying, you know what, I would love to pick your brain on this project. And, I always thought, no is always if you don't have time, I understand. Most people do. And so it doesn't always have to be that, hey, I've done something for them, so I feel comfortable asking them. It's just, hey, I'm putting things out there, and maybe nothing's come directly to you at this point, but in time it will.
Mm-hmm.
So I ask.
Yes, I love that. So what do you mean when you refer to this idea of the infinite power of introductions?
Well, let's stop and work some math here. If I know you and I know Sejal, there's one introduction, right, that I can make. But let's say the number's 100. I know 100 people, and then Meredith Bell comes into my world, right? I can make 100 introductions from that. Now I don't know that I would, because they don't all make sense, and you would be overwhelmed, and that would, that's counterproductive. It's kind of cheating, right? I want to have some substance behind these things. But if somebody else comes along, all of a sudden there's more people for me to meet. And at the same time, those 100 people are doing the same for me. I'm getting to meet people. So it's, it just seems to me that there's always two people that don't know one another that could benefit from knowing one another. And, I'm always surprised. Hey, do you know this person? No, I don't. Really? Because you're pretty much in the same building in Philadelphia, and I'm 500 miles away in Columbus, Ohio, or whatever the distance is, right? And I know the two of you, and I just think you guys would really hit it off. So you just don't know. And, it's good to ask, because if I assumed, well, they must know each other, it would never happen.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yes. So for someone that has been, let's say, a little uncomfortable, or it doesn't come as naturally for them, what's one thing that they could do to start thinking about how can I start imagining two people that I could introduce to each other?
Well, I think the first thing I would do is I would look at my list of contacts and say, who on this list do I really like, that I really want to help? And, maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a friend who's been displaced. Who do I really want to help? And then just sitting and looking at the list and kind of going down the list and saying, okay, who could I possibly introduce this person to? My youngest son, he graduated last year. He's went through a commercial real estate appraising apprenticeship program with one of the big real estate companies. He's passed that. He's kind of now in the production end of things, where he needs to produce. And I said, Chase, I know a lot of people, and I just sat down and I just started writing a list, and slowly but surely just making introductions. And I've looking at my list. There's like 10 people. I've introduced them to 5. And I'll do that for other people as well, who will reach out to me and hey, here's a podcast and that's the thing with podcasters is, there's always room on my podcast for a good guest. There's always room. I always say, well, I want to scale back, but then I run into so many great people. It's like, I can't not have them, right? And it's, and so, when I run into good people, I just start firing their name out and just, hey, you're a podcaster. I know you're looking for good people. This is a great person I talked to. Are you interested? Yeah, I'm interested. So there's just so many opportunities. But, to answer your question, it's just focus on that one person. What can I do? It doesn't have to be like 10, like with my son, just one a week.
Mm-hmm.
And then, do that for a couple months, and then maybe try and get 2 a week. In time, you're just going to kind of develop this awareness to, okay, I just met you. You just said something. You're looking for law firms. They're looking for law firms. You don't sell the same thing. I need to introduce you to, and step out of the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so great. I appreciate that. The other thing that you have as a theme through all of your books, and you also live it, and I firmly believe this too, it's this idea of being a giver and not a taker. And you've mentioned it, this idea of being generous with your time. What are the downsides? Because some people will say, I'm going to give, but I'm also then expecting something back. what's the danger of having an attitude like that, where you're looking for reciprocity, like it's almost conditional, versus giving without expectation?
Yeah, there's a wonderful book out there by Dr. Adam Grant. It's called Give and Take, and he's a professor at the Wharton School. And for the listeners, he identifies three types of people. There are givers. We get it. They like to give. There are takers, people who like to take, and then there are matchers. And most people are matchers. Most people are, hey, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to kind of wait and see what comes back. And throughout the book, he talks about lots of different things. And this is not Dr. Grant's conjecture. These are actual studies he's referencing, which really puts a lot of power to it.
Yeah.
And what he finds is that givers tend to be some of the most successful people, but givers also tend to be some of the most unsuccessful people. And he goes on to explain, he says, sometimes there are givers who just give to a fault. They give and they self-sacrifice to do it. I'm going to stay late. I'm going to work with this person and devote time to them. And then that person leaves the firm and starts competing with them or whatever it is. And what he encourages, and I try to subscribe to it, is I'm going to give to people where my giving is an investment, meaning, and it's not nearly an investment for me, but are they going to be giving to other people? Are they going to be sharing what I'm doing? Or not what I'm doing, but just kind of adopting my mindset and helping others. Because if they do that, eventually that's going to come back to me. If you give to somebody who's never going to share it with the rest of the world, just, I guess, use money as an example. If I give two people $1,000 and one digs a hole in the backyard and buries it for later, and the other person says, you know what, I'm going to spend it in the community because I have $1,000 and this benefits other people. Well, that $1,000 is going to make its way through the community, and in theory, pieces of that will come back to me. And so you want to align yourself with people who are predisposed to helping others. And that's for me, that's the lesson. So I do look for people and see what they do.
I love that book, by the way. I thought that was so well done. So let's say someone is getting ready to attend a networking event. What are the things they should do, and what should they avoid doing?
Well, what I used to be I'm Mr. Network, right? And I'm somewhat introverted. I don't enjoy those. It's not that I don't enjoy them, but they bring up a level of anxiety in me. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. What I do is I put on what I call my cloak of invincibility. And people go to those events and they're like, okay, what am I going to get? I'm going to bring cards, here's my commercial. I'm just going to, my goal is to close business at this event. Well, stop that. Your goal is to go there and meet people and see who you can help. And that's what I call my cloak of invincibility, because the reason we get this anxiety is because we're afraid people are going to reject us. But if we put on this, this cloak or this cape that we're a superhero and we're going to walk in and we're going to serve people, nobody rejects Superman. And everybody welcomes that in the room. And so that would be the first thing I would tell people, is get that mindset that I'm going to go help people. I'm just going to trust that it's going to come back to me at some point in time. That would be the first thing I would recommend doing. There's another, I forget the name of it. The author is Berta Medina. And she writes a book and she talks about going to networking events. And she says, when I go to a networking event and there are 5 people, it's my goal to get 5 business cards. When I go to a networking event with 100 people, it's my goal to get 5 business cards. So in her point, she goes on to explain, don't try to meet the room. Meet 5 people. Don't worry about who those people are. Develop a relationship with them. They'll connect you to people. You just never know where people are connected. And a lot of times people will go to events and they'll kind of, well, you're fresh out of college. I can't waste time with you. where's Mr. Big Shot? Where's Miss Big Shot? I need to align myself with them. Don't do that. Just take time, talk to that young person, find a way to help them, because they're going to be around for a while. And it might be getting to know them might be the very opportunity to helping the big shot, right? The big shot. Yeah, we're struggling to fill roles in our firm. Oh, I just met somebody. I'll be right back. Let me go grab this person. So yeah, don't pass judgment on people.
That is such good advice. And, it applies everywhere, but especially when you're meeting someone for the first time and you draw conclusions based on an initial impression and you don't give them an opportunity to share with you who they are.
Yeah.
I love that idea of who can I help? The other thought that I had as I was listening was this idea of being curious. If you take that attitude of, I'm going to learn about this person.
Yeah.
It makes them tick. What are they excited about? Because I know for me, if somebody says, well, what do you love to do outside of work? I can talk for a half hour about my love of bird watching, and
Right.
So just knowing to ask questions that aren't threatening to somebody, that don't come across as pushy, but genuinely wanting to learn more about who they are. To me, that goes a long way for all three: know, like, and trust.
Well, and the other thing is it takes the pressure off of us, because people will tell me, I don't like to go to events. I never know what to say. You really don't have to say much, be curious, bird watching. My brother-in-law is really into bird watching, so I could have a conversation with you about it. I wouldn't be as knowledgeable. Hey, where have you been? What sorts of things do you go on these bird counts, in the spring and fall? Just, so I know enough to kind of bring it out. And,
right.
And I do some coaching on these sorts of things. And what I tell people is that sort of small talk is really invaluable, because it allows you to work things into, a bigger conversation.
Mm-hmm.
The one example I always use, I was talking to somebody who they were really into water skiing. And I just, oh boy, this weather's really hot. Oh, I love it. We get out and we water ski all the time. So you water ski, talking about water skiing, and then it just segued into business by something akin to, water skiing's not cheap. What do you do to pay for it all? Right. Then all of a sudden we're talking about, and I'm not steering them, but it's like, okay, we're done with water skiing. I want to talk about your business. And, just kind of showing an interest in them.
Mm-hmm. I think if we understand and operate from every person we meet wants to know that they matter.
Yeah.
So if there's something we can say or do that conveys to them, you matter to me.
Yep.
It's the investment of the time, the caring. It's just an amazing return that we get. Yeah. Frank, we could talk for hours. I so enjoy hearing your expertise in this.
We're going to talk again, because you're going to be back on my podcast.
Thank you. Yes. And so as we wrap up, I would love for you to share, how can people connect with you so that they can add you to their network, learn more about your work, your books, AmSpirit, just everything about what you do?
Yeah, I have a website out there, frankagin.com, which is like all things Frank Agin. It's got my emails. People like to show up in their own way. Some people just love text. Okay, I'm not partial to it, but if that's what you like, I'll do it. So some are LinkedIn, some are Facebook, but all my books are on there. My podcasts are on there. Information about AmSpirit's on there. Certainly ways to connect with me. If I can help, I'm always happy to help.
Great. Thank you. Frank, thank you for being my guest today. I so loved our conversation, and I love the shared values and focus that we both have on giving and serving others. And I appreciate who you are.
Thank you very much as well.
Thanks for tuning in to my podcast. Now head over to growstrongleaders.com and check out our 2 books, Connect with Your Team and Peer Coaching Made Simple. While you're there, download the free facilitator guide, to find out how to implement our unique peer coaching system. Until next time, I'm Meredith Bell.